In this problem, we're given three equations, f of x, g of x, and h of x, and we're asked to multiply different pairs of them. So, for example, the first question we are to find is the product of f of x and g of x. So I'm going to copy the problem down over here. We have f of x. There's no symbol between f of x and g of x, so at least as I'm writing it. So if ever you see this without a symbol, you could think of it as it's multiplication, implied multiplication. Here they're using a dot to indicate that. So I'm going to make a couple of substitutions here. You see right here that it defined f of x to be equal to 5x. So I think of it as I'm going to replace all of these symbols, f of x, with these symbols, 5x. So whenever I make a substitution, I use parentheses. Sometimes they're necessary, sometimes they're not. It's always safer to include them if you're not sure. Now, g of x has two terms. We call this a binomial. And because g of x has two terms, this is where your parentheses would be important. So when you replace g of x with negative x minus 2, these things are being multiplied. So had you not put parentheses, had you just write minus x minus 2, it would look to someone like, and it would be, subtraction here instead of multiplication. So the idea is when you make the substitution, put parentheses here. I won't put the dot in the middle because it's clear to me that it's intended to be multiplication. So now I have a monomial here, 2 times a binomial, and I use the distributive property here. So the 5x is going to get multiplied by the first term, and a negative times a positive is a negative, and 5x times x is 5x squared. And then distributing the 5x to the second term, which is negative 2, I have negative 2 times 5 would be a negative 10, and then of course x. So if you're typing this into Math AS, you'd want to go click here and type that in, negative 5x, and you can just use the caret key, which is Shift 6 on the keyboard, and then subtract 10x. On to the next problem. This time they want me to do f of x times h of x, so let me just kind of delete some of the stuff I did here to make room. This time we want f of x times h of x. Let's see if I can just delete the g and insert h of x here. Again, when I make my substitution for the two functions, I'm going to write parentheses. So here's going to be f of x, and I'm going to have a set of parentheses for h of x. I better make it a little bigger when I do h of x. In fact, I'm just going to leave it open for now. F of x was 5x, and if you look over here, h of x is this trinomial. This is an equation that has three terms. A term is anything separated by an addition or subtraction symbol. So this is 1, 2, 3 terms. We call these trinomials. So copying this down, I have x squared plus 7x plus 10. So now I'm going to use the distributive property again, except I'm going to distribute to three things. The first thing would be 5x times x squared. That's 5x cubed. Then I have 5x times 7x. 5 times 7 is 35. And x times x in math is referred to as x squared. And then 5x times 10. Since 5 times 10 is 50, I have 50x. So I'm going to go over here in Math AS, and I'm going to type that in. 5x to the third, using that caret key, plus 35x caret key to the second power, plus 50x. And now I'm just going to continue on and do the next two as well, since this video doesn't seem to be too long. So as I did before, we're going to clear the slate, and this time they want me to multiply g of x by itself. So the question is to do g of x times g of x. And if you look on Math AS, they've defined g of x to be, quite simply, that linear equation here with two terms, negative x subtract 2. So I'm going to have g of x twice, and this time I'll have a binomial times a binomial. In this very special case, when you're multiplying two binomials, we call this the product of two binomials. A lot of teachers use that FOIL method, and FOIL is just an acronym to multiply the first, outside, inside, and last. I don't think of it this way. I just think of it as you're distributing twice. So you've got this first term here, negative x, and in fact, let me just put a little square around it. It gets distributed to both of these things, and then in a minute, this second term will get distributed to both those things. I like to think of it that way, just in case there's more than two terms in either of these. FOIL wouldn't work, but this idea would. So at any rate, negative x. Negative times a negative is a positive. X times x is x squared. Then I do the negative x times the negative 2. That's positive 2x. And then don't forget I've got this term here, which is negative 2. And it gets distributed to both this guy and this guy over here. So negative 2 times the term negative x would be negative times the negative is a positive, so that's a positive 2x. And then negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4. And we have the opportunity here to combine some like terms. If you have 2x and you add 2x, that would be 4 times x. So in simplified form, I have x squared plus 4x plus 4. So I'll type that into Math AS. X squared plus 4x plus 4. I think I'm well within my 10-minute YouTube limit. So if you have the patience, I will do the last problem as well, which is g of x times h of x. Let's go up here and put in h of x. And g, of course, is not changed. G of x is still negative x minus 2. And h of x is that longer trinomial, x squared plus 7x plus 10. So if you're interested, we call this the product of a linear equation and a quadratic. This one's linear because highest degree is 1, the highest exponent is 1. Here, this equation's highest exponent is 2. We call this a quadratic. So same thing here. This is, for example, why I don't like FOIL. Not that I don't like FOIL, it's just that it's very specific. It only works when you have a binomial times a binomial. So I think of it as you're just doing the distributive property. So I'm going to distribute the negative x times all three things. Negative x times x squared is negative x cubed. And then, again, another negative times a positive, again a negative. And then x times 7x is 7x squared. And then we have negative x times 10, negative times a positive is a negative, and then we'd have 10x. That's the first term. Now I'm going to take the second term, which is negative 2, and I'm going to distribute it 3 times. So the first time would be negative 2. Oh, I forgot to draw my arrow up here, didn't I? So negative 2 times x squared is negative 2x squared. We have negative 2 being multiplied by a positive 7x. Negative times a positive is a negative. 2 times 7 is 14. We have the x. And then my last multiplication finally is a negative 2 times a 10. That would be negative 20. And then I'm going to simplify this before I type into Math AS. This is the only term with a third power. So I'm just going to copy it. No other terms to combine. I have this guy right here, which matches this one. They both have x squared in them. So a minus 7x squared and a minus 2x squared makes a minus 9x squared. What else do I have? I've got this guy right here, which is negative 10x, and this guy here, which is minus 14x. So if you combine this one with this one, a minus 10 and a minus 14 makes negative 24x. And then finally, I've got the minus 20, which I can't combine with anything else. So I get this big, long answer with 4 terms, and I will type it in. Negative x to the third, subtract 9x raised to the second power, subtract 24x minus 20. And those would be my 4 final answers in simplified form, and I hope that you